Pretty Woman wasn't just a romantic comedy. It was a cultural moment that captured the magic of love, the hope of transformation, and the charm of Julia Roberts. Now, more than 3 decades later, whispers of a sequel have become reality. And fans are asking the same question. Can lightning strike twice? When Pretty Woman first arrived in theaters in March of 1990, nobody expected it to become one of the most beloved romantic comedies of all time. Directed by Gary Marshall, the film told the story of Vivian Ward. It was playful, emotional, and daring for its time. Audiences didn't just watch Vivian and Edward fall in love, they believed in them. The movie was a fairy tale wrapped in real-world struggles, making it both dreamy and relatable. Julia Roberts, then only 22 years old, wasn't yet the global star we know today. But from the very first smile she flashed on screen, something clicked. Her energy was radiant. Her laughter was contagious. And her vulnerability made Vivian more than just a character. She became a symbol of hope, resilience, and charm. The world called her America's sweetheart, and it wasn't just a label. It was a promise that Roberts would go on to define a generation of romantic storytelling. Richard Gere, already an established actor, brought balance to the film. His calm, polished Edward contrasted beautifully with Vivian's untamed spirit. Together, they created chemistry so powerful that audiences rooted for them long after the credits rolled. The film grossed nearly $500 million worldwide, transforming Julia Roberts into a household name and solidifying Pretty Woman as one of the greatest love stories in Hollywood history. But Pretty Woman was more than box office numbers. It shaped the way romantic comedies were made for years to come. The makeover montage, the shopping scene with the unforgettable line, "Big mistake, huge," and the grand romantic gesture at the fire escape, they became cultural touchstones. People quoted the lines, replayed the soundtrack, and saw a piece of themselves in Vivian's journey. It was a fairy tale for grown-ups, a reminder that love could appear in the most unexpected places. As the years passed, the film lived on, not just as a movie, but as an idea. Romantic comedies came and went, but none carried the same mix of heart and fantasy. Fans wondered, what happened to Vivian and Edward after the curtain closed? Did their love last? Did Vivian find her happily ever after in a world that often resists happy endings? For decades, these questions lingered in the minds of those who held Pretty Woman close to their hearts. And now, in 2025, the answers may finally be revealed. Pretty Woman 2 is not just a sequel, it's a journey back into a story that defined an era. But this time, it's different. This time, the woman who once dreamed of a better life is returning not as the girl in need of saving, but as a woman who has lived, loved, and lost. Julia Roberts is stepping into Vivian Ward's shoes again, not to relive the past, but to show the world what it means to have a second chance at love and legacy. This return isn't just about reviving a classic film. It's about giving audiences a chance to reconnect with a character who represents hope, change, and courage. Vivian's story is no longer just about being rescued. It's about rewriting the meaning of romance, reminding us that fairy tales don't end when the credits roll. They evolve, they deepen, and sometimes they begin again when we least expect it. As fans wait for Pretty Woman 2, they're not just waiting for another romantic comedy. They're waiting for closure, for nostalgia, and for a fresh reminder of why this story mattered in the first place. The stage is set, the curtain is rising, and Julia Roberts is ready to give us one more reason to believe in love's second chance. Asterisk. When the lights faded after Pretty Woman in 1990, Julia Roberts didn't just walk out of the theater as a rising actress, she walked into history. The movie turned her into a global star overnight, but it was what she did next that defined her legacy. She wasn't content to remain Hollywood's Cinderella. She refused to be trapped in a single role, and instead carved out a career that spanned decades, genres, and generations. In the early years after Pretty Woman, Julia carefully chose roles that proved she was more than just a pretty face with a dazzling smile. She starred in Steel Magnolias, earning an Academy Award nomination. Then came films like Sleeping with the Enemy and The Pelican Brief, which showcased her depth in thrillers and dramas. Each role was a step further away from being typecast, and a step closer to being seen as one of the most versatile actresses of her time. But the 1990s belonged to her in a very special way. Julia Roberts became the face of romantic comedies, giving audiences stories that felt timeless. My Best Friend's Wedding was funny and heartbreaking all at once, proving she could carry the weight of both comedy and tragedy. Notting Hill paired her with Hugh Grant in one of the most iconic love stories of the decade. And once again, audiences around the world saw themselves in her vulnerability, her warmth, and her honesty. And then in 2000, came the performance that solidified her as Hollywood royalty, Erin Brockovich. Playing a struggling single mother who took on a corporate giant, Julia delivered not just charm but fire. The role earned her an Academy Award for Best Actress and made her the highest-paid actress in the world. It was no longer a question of whether Julia Roberts could act. She had become a symbol of strength, determination, and brilliance. Yet behind the red carpets and flashing cameras, Julia Roberts was also making choices for herself. At the height of her fame, when studios were lining up with blank checks, she stepped back. She focused on family, raising her 3 children with her husband, cinematographer Daniel Moder. In an industry that demands constant visibility, Julia chose privacy. She appeared in fewer films, sometimes only one every few years. But when she did return, it mattered. Movies like Eat, Pray, Love and August, Osage County reminded fans that her presence could still command attention and move hearts. This balance between fame and family, between public image and private life, gave Julia something rare in Hollywood: longevity. She wasn't a star who burned bright and faded away. She became part of the cultural fabric. To many, she wasn't just an actress. She was a reminder of a time when love stories on screen felt magical and authentic. And that's why her return as Vivian Ward in Pretty Woman 2 is so significant. For Julia Roberts, this isn't just another movie. It's a circle closing, a return to the role that started it all. But with decades of wisdom and experience behind her, she's no longer the wide-eyed newcomers. She's a woman who has lived through the highs and lows of Hollywood, who has loved, endured, and thrived. The legacy of Julia Roberts is not only about the characters she played, but the way she carried herself in a world that often consumes its stars. She became a model of reinvention, someone who could step into the spotlight when she chose and step away when it no longer served her. In doing so, she held on to something even more valuable than fame-respect. Now, as audiences prepare to see her once again as Vivian, they're not just excited for the nostalgia of a beloved character. They're excited to see Julia herself older, wiser, and more powerful than ever. Her return is not about recapturing the past, but about redefining what it means to be a leading lady in Hollywood. It's about proving that love stories don't expire with age, and that a woman's value on screen only grows richer with time. Julia Roberts' career has been a journey of transformation. From a young dreamer in Pretty Woman to an Oscar-winning icon, and finally to a woman who chose to write her own story away from the noise of fame. And now, with Pretty Woman 2, she steps back into the light, not to repeat history, but to honor it, because sometimes the greatest legacy isn't about where you began, but how you choose to return. Asterisk, it has been 35 years since Vivian Ward first stepped into that limousine, and the world has changed as much as she has. Pretty Woman 2 doesn't try to repeat the past. Instead, it dares to ask a question Hollywood rarely asks: what happens after Happily Ever After? In this new chapter, Vivian is no longer the starry-eyed woman searching for escape. She is older now, seasoned by life, touched by both love and loss. The sequel explores not just romance, but reinvention, the kind of journey only time can create. Vivian is not the same woman who once danced barefoot in a penthouse suite. She carries the grace of age, the wisdom of experience, and the scars of choices that shaped her. At its heart, Pretty Woman 2 is a story about second chances, not only in love, but in identity, purpose, and dreams. For Vivian, life after Edward wasn't always the perfect fairy tale. Time and reality have a way of testing even the strongest bonds. and the film bravely acknowledges that happily ever after endings are rarely the end of the story. Without giving away too much, the film hints at a journey where Vivian must face what remains when the magic of youth fades. And when the world no longer sees you as the bright young woman in a red dress, but the film doesn't linger in sadness. Instead, it leans into resilience. Vivian has built a life on her own terms. She has fought to create a voice for herself in spaces that once dismissed her. Her journey is a reminder that fairy tales aren't about being saved by someone else, they're about saving yourself. Again and again, in different chapters of your life. The themes of Pretty Woman to mirror the struggles and hopes of today's world. Love in midlife is no longer portrayed as background filler. It takes center stage. The movie explores what it means to fall in love when the rules are different, when priorities shift and when time feels more precious. It tells us that passion, vulnerability, and romance don't disappear with age, they evolve. They become deeper, more meaningful, perhaps more fragile. Friendship and self-acceptance also play a powerful role in the story. Vivian isn't just chasing a relationship, she's rediscovering herself. The film gives her a chance to ask questions many of us carry. Who am I now? What do I want from life when so many pages have already been written? And is it too late to dream of something new? The answers unfold not in grand fairy tale gestures, but in quiet moments of courage and honesty. The story also reflects a world that has changed dramatically since 1990. In the original film, Vivian's transformation was sparked by luxury shopping sprees, glittering dresses, and the validation of being chosen by a wealthy man. In Pretty Woman 2, her transformation is different. It's about authenticity. It's about realizing that she doesn't need to fit into anyone else's vision of worth. This time, Vivian defines her own value. And yes, there is romance. A love story that isn't about fireworks and first kisses, but about two people daring to believe in love again, even when life has given them reasons to give up. Whether it's with Edward or a new character who challenges her, Vivian's journey explores the beauty of rediscovery, the idea that love can surprise us when we think we've seen it all. The film doesn't shy away from nostalgia either. Fans will recognize echoes of the first movie, small callbacks, symbolic gestures, and familiar settings that tie past and present together. But instead of repeating old magic, the sequel reframes it, showing how moments that once defined us can return in unexpected ways, reshaped by time. In the end, Pretty Woman 2 isn't just a continuation of a love story. It's a meditation on growth. It asks what it means to age with grace in a world that often clings to youth. It asks what it means to love yourself enough to take risks again. And it asks what kind of legacy we leave behind, not just in the hearts of others, but in the way we choose to live out our own final chapters. For Vivian Ward, this is more than a sequel. It's her second chance not to relive the past, but to embrace a future that still holds magic. And for Julia Roberts, stepping into this role once again, it's an invitation for all of us to believe that fairy tales don't belong only to the young. They belong to anyone brave enough to hope again. Asterisk, every great story leaves a mark, but only a few become part of our collective memory. Pretty Woman was one of those rare films. It wasn't just about love. It was about possibility. It gave audiences permission to dream, to laugh, and to believe in the idea that even the most unlikely of people could find their place in the world. And now, with Pretty Woman 2, the legacy of that dream is being rewritten for a new generation. The impact of this sequel reaches far beyond the silver screen. For Julia Roberts, returning as Vivian Ward is not simply revisiting an old character, is reclaiming a piece of herself. It is proof that an actress doesn't have to fade into the background once she has passed the age Hollywood considers marketable. Instead, she can come back stronger, deeper, and more compelling than ever. This film challenges an industry that too often sidelines women over 40, reminding the world that their stories are not finished. In fact, they are richer than ever before. For audiences, Pretty Woman 2 is more than nostalgia. It is a reflection of their own lives. Many who fell in love with Vivian in 1990 are now older themselves, carrying their own histories of love, loss, and renewal. Watching Julia Roberts step back into Vivian's shoes is like holding up a mirror. It says, your story isn't over either. There is still time for laughter, for adventure, and for love. That message resonates in a world where so many feel left behind once youth fades. The film insists that beauty doesn't belong to the young. It belongs to anyone who chooses to live with courage and heart. But perhaps the greatest legacy of Pretty Woman 2 lies in how it redefines the fairy tale. The first film gave us the image of a man climbing a fire escape to rescue the woman he loved. It was magical, unforgettable, and perfectly suited for its time. But in today's world, audiences are ready for a different kind of ending. This time, the story isn't about rescue, it's about partnership. It's about finding someone who doesn't complete you, but who celebrates the person you've already become. The film suggests that the truest love stories are not about saving someone from their struggles, but about walking alongside them as they embrace who they are. Culturally, the film is also a bridge. It connects generations. Parents who remember the original will watch alongside children who are discovering it for the first time. It sparks conversations about how love and identity evolve, and how every era deserves its own version of the fairy tale. In that way, Pretty Woman 2 is more than a sequel. It's a cultural event, reminding us that cinema has the power to carry us across time, linking the past with the present for Julia Roberts. This role may stand as one of her final great performances, a closing note that honors where she came from and what she became. For fans, it offers closure to a story that has lingered in their hearts for decades. And for Hollywood, it sets a precedent that sequels don't need to be reboots or cash grabs. They can be meaningful continuations that expand the story, deepen its themes, and give characters the endings they deserve. The legacy of Pretty Woman 2 will not be measured only in box office numbers. Though no doubt audiences will fill theaters out of love for Julia Roberts and the memory of the first film, its true legacy will be in how it makes people feel. It will remind them that love is timeless, that second chances are possible, and that even after 35 years, character can step back onto the screen and still take our breath away. When the credits roll, fans will carry more than just nostalgia out of the theater. They will carry the reminder that fairy tales don't end with happily ever after. They continue. They evolve, and they often return when we least expect them. Vivian Ward's journey is proof of that. Julia Roberts' return is proof of that. In the film itself, Pretty Woman 2 is proof of that. In the end, this isn't just about one woman's second chance at love. It's about all of us, about the way stories shape our lives, about the way time changes us, and about the way hope endures even when we think it has faded. That is the true legacy of Pretty Woman. That is the gift of its sequel. And that is why Julia Roberts' return matters not just for Hollywood, but for everyone who has ever believed in love.